So going back to the statement of Mr. Barak, the Minister of Defense, you know that in international relations, there are many ways of trying to impress the other side to think rationally. I mean, those of you who are studying, strategies realize that in strategic games, the working assumption is always rationality. In other words, you have to convince the other side to think in rational terms and to make its own cost-benefit analysis. Because if not, then there will be no order, there will be no life, there will be no peace, it will be impossible to govern this place. This is not working in our case. So Mr. Barak is basically saying, you better watch out, take another look at the situation, restrain yourself. So far, I would say, despite all the talking, and this is also disputed right now and criticized quite severely by the Israeli public opinion, because the Israeli public opinion expects the government which collects taxes to provide security. And if the government is not able to provide security to its citizens, then people are going to say, maybe we need another government. And since we are a democracy, and we are going to probably face a governmental crisis if this situation is going to be resolved. Moreover, I would say that if the Hamas is going to emerge out of this current crisis, out the way, say, Hezbollah emerged in the summer of 2006 by the sheer fact that they survived this military attack, they could claim then later on victory, divine victory in the case of the Hezbollah. How do you believe this is going to impact on those rational elements among the Palestinians who would like to seek an accommodation with Israel? Do you believe that Mahmoud Abbas, who is negotiating with Israel on behalf of the Palestinian PLO, is going to emerge stronger or weaker? Will be able to consider serious concessions at the table, because without concessions there will be no compromise, and with no compromise there will be no solution to the problem. And how the Egyptians are going to look at the fact that, in front of their eyes, at their very eastern border, an Islamic radical state, a rump state, yes, is created, which will have a negative, impact on the Muslim brothers inside. So there are all kinds of ramifications which have to be considered. Now, if you mentioned the Vinograd Committee report, I would suggest to you a different reading of the report. The report, which holds about 629 pages, describes the 6 years preceding the Israeli decision in summer of 2006 to retaliate for the abduction of the 2 Israeli soldiers and the unprovoked shooting in the Israeli territory, an act of aggression by international law, by indicating that the government in Israel ignored for 6 years these elements. There was a military build-up in Lebanon after we pulled out in May of 2000 from Lebanon to the international border. The United Nations certified this border. It was called the Blue Line Arrangement. And for 6 years, we did not respond to the repeated acts of aggression coming from the Hezbollah. And the government was criticized for this. Now, we are now in the 2.5-year situation, similar situation, building up on the border with Gaza. We are listening to people who are saying, not now, not this type of activity, it's not going to work. And meanwhile, Hamas is getting stronger, is beefing up its capabilities, is taking, it's manipulating public opinion, and is bringing under the disguise of breaching this border. They didn't go only for shopping to El Arish. They also shop for stuff, which is missiles and explosives and industrial equipment, which is operated by electricity provided by the Israeli power plant in Ashkelon. So what kind of a conflict is this? There is nothing, because if you are going to refer to the international law, the laws of the armed conflict, then the government has to do everything in its capacity to put an end to that. I will strongly refer you, I shall quote from you, the summary of ruling by the Israeli Supreme Court, which was given at the end of January this year, regarding a petition by 10 human rights organizations in Israel protesting the Israeli measures to cut back supply of electricity to Gaza. And the Supreme Court, after deliberating the petitions, concluded, and I shall quote, in conclusion, we again point out that the Gaza Strip is controlled by a murderous terrorist group that operates incessantly to cause injury to the State of Israel and its citizens and violates every possible precept of international law with its violent actions and makes no distinctions towards civilians, men, women, and children. Nevertheless, as the stated above, the State of Israel is required to act against the terroristic organizations within the framework of the law in accordance with the dictates of international law, and to refrain from deliberately harming the civilian population located in the Gaza Strip. In light of the entirety of the information presented to us with respect to the supply of electricity to the Gaza Strip, we believe that the amount of industrial diesel fuel that the state indicated it intends to supply and the electricity that is regularly supplied through the power lines from Israel are sufficient to meet the vital humanitarian needs of the Gaza Strip at this time. So they are continuing to get electricity. Israel supplies 120 megawatt of electricity as we speak today to Gaza Strip, a region which has been declared by Israel currently hostile territory, which basically employs military means and terrorism against Israeli citizens, civilians. They are not shooting at military facilities, they are shooting at Israeli civilians. Sderot is not a military camp, it's a city, like this city. And if they shoot at you in this city, you'll go crazy. We restrain ourselves, so please, no lecture in international law and proportionality, because we are not different from any other nation. Article 51 of self-defense of the UN Charter applies also to the State of Israel.
I was not accusing you of something.
No,
I was asking a question.
Yeah,
and my question is, does the Israeli government think that by striking back and agreeing that there are attacks on Sderot, does the Israeli government think that by attacking or cutting Gaza's power or whatever, sealing it off from the outside world, you will indeed end up in having some kind of an agreement or peace or quiet in Israel? And that's my question.
Well, listen, in theory, one can say that if you continue this policy of pressure, you're going to be guaranteed of a prolonged crisis. But the crisis exists anyway. If you don't do anything, you also have to weigh the consequence of doing nothing. If you don't do anything, you say you're sitting ducks. Actually, this is what the government of Israel is doing for the 7 years. Very little. I mean, if you consider the act of provocation, again, unprecedented if you look at any other diplomatic precedents in history, because usually when you shoot at a country, the country has the right to respond militarily. This is the international law. Okay? So for 7 years, we are taking and we are telling ourselves, you know, if we put more pressure, then nothing is going to come out, they are going to get stronger, they're going to get more popular, everybody's going to take pity on them, and everybody's going to jump and criticize Israel for collective punishment. Okay? But this is not a solution either. So if you ask me if the government has good options, the answer is no. The government does not have good options. The best option would have been for these guys, you know, to be quiet and to let Mahmoud Abbas negotiate an agreement which eventually is going to give them the hope of having an independent state. Everybody understands that this state will apply also to Gaza Strip. But since you have in Gaza, through a democratic so-called process, a government which says, we don't want a state next to Israel. We want one big Palestine instead of Israel. And we're going to fight them. We will never recognize them. So they are continuous with this kind of provocations. Then the government, my government doesn't have any good options, but doing nothing is not an option. Because it also has a responsibility vis-a-vis the public opinion. Now, you can smile as much as you want, but try to put yourself in our shoes and see what, sir, will be the options available to you. You cannot come and give me an answer, you know, based on whatever, you know, books have been written that eventually a guerrilla movement cannot be defeated. You know, this is an academic response. it does not take care of the political awkward situation in which my government finds itself right now, in which we have daily demonstrations of the citizens of this place. And we are talking a whole region which will be, I would say, 300,000 to 400,000 people, which is a considerable number given the small size of our, say, population.